It is about you. You are the selling point, and the landscape is changing. So be your authentic self, because no one wants to go to work being miserable all day. Look at your own resume, look at your own LinkedIn, and look at your impact and what you have provided for that other company. And if you write things in that context, you're going to talk to the next employer.
In my opinion, it's about giving the customer what they really want and just blowing their mind once they get it. And that's what I really love to see, honestly.
Get people to do more of home cooking, home cooked meals, healthy meals, so we can all live long and happy.
I'm very proud to be a mom, because not for nothing, women are amazing.
Oh my God, the sacrifice, and how we make it look so easy.
I was just telling Joanne before we got on the call, I said I had to run from my daughter's school. They had an Easter egg hunt. I said, all right, Mom, I gotta go to work. But you know, just as moms, we make it happen. You know, supernatural abilities. We are the example for them, you know, and I know that with them being a better version of us.
You have to try. You never know how creative you are until you try. Because I didn't think I was creative. I found my creative side during a horrible time in my life.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Thursday Lunch and Learn. I don't know what's going on. Why my screen's so small? Y'all seeing this too? Let me see. There we go. I got you. Hello, everyone. How are you doing? Today is March 27th. It's my birthday. So thank you all for joining to be on with me on my very special day. We have a great conversation that we're going to be talking about on today, and then stay tuned because we're also going to be talking about our membership launch that we had go on this morning and where things are with that. So I am really excited to be sharing my time with you all on today. I see a couple of people in the chat. Thank you so much. Z, saying happy birthday to me. Thank you. Thank you. Green Butterfly Queen. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you all. I could not do any of this without the community that supports me and getting it done. So I love you for showing up for us, right? And that is very important to me, is that we show up for us. So today we're going to welcome to our weekly edition of our Lunch and Learn a person that I met maybe, I want to say, I feel like we met longer than last year, because she has just been a firehouse, and just the conversations that we have had in our time together has been really paramount. Her name is Venus Scantlebury, and Venus is a proud Brooklyn resident who grew up in East New York's public school system. And who doesn't love someone who's grown up in the public systems that are now being challenged right now, right? So this is all part of us showing up for ourselves. She earned her BA in philosophy from John Jay College of Criminal Justice in 2022 and has been deeply involved in community advocacy ever since. During her college years, she served as treasurer of the Black Student Union. I was the treasurer and president of my Black Student Union. So definitely have that in common. I love that. Helping define and celebrate Black culture on campus. After college, Venus interned with the city councilmember Sandy Nurse. She has been in the weeds for a while. So I'm really glad that you got to work under her leadership, where she was introduced to grassroots community advocacy. So that's good. I'm glad, like, people just getting in the weeds and really showing up for ourselves. Now as an outreach coordinator for the New York City Civilian Complaint Review Board. And this was something that I really just learned about a little, maybe 2 years ago. And I don't feel like it is widely shared. So I'm really glad that Venus is going to be here talking to us today about it more in depth. She works to educate civilians about their rights during police encounters and the process for filing complaints. What does that look like? What should we be doing? What should we not be doing? So that we live to tell the story on the other side. And that's the key thing. What do you need to do so that you live to tell the story on the other side? She also leads Black at Ccrb, an affinity group that provides safe spaces for Black staff members to connect and support one another. She's passionate about justice. Venus plans to attend law school in the near future. Yes, to specialize in public interest and policy law, which is very much needed right now. Her mission is clear: to educate, empower, and advocate for her community. So let's welcome Venus to the stage.
Hi, everyone.
Hey. You don't hear me? Oh no.
Yes, I can hear you.
You can hear me? Okay. My screen looks so. Welcome, Venus. So tell us, we were just talking in the back a little bit about you and names and how names are so important. So can you share a little bit about your name, what your name means, where it comes from?
So, thank you for having me. My name is Venus, and I'm named after my grandmother. So I'm the third generation of Venuses in my family. My great grandmother was named Venus, and then my grandmother was named Venus, and then I'm named Venus. Scantlebury comes from my grandfather is from Barbados, so that's a Bayesian name, or a Bayesian last name. So. Okay. I hold my name with so much pride, and I when I was a child, like, I did not know the significance of my name, but now it's always like a conversation starter, and then I'll get like, "Do you know Mars? Do you know?" I'm like, yeah, I do. So, yeah.
Of course. I love that. I love we are part of this rites of passage group, and we do called Beauty Tree, and we do a part that's called What's in a Name, like understanding the name and really having ownership of your name. And when I did that, like my name Athenia means goddess of wisdom. And so that for me is like, yeah, I am that, like, standing in your truth and in who and why your name, why your name is what it is, right? And so the fact that your name is an ancestral name, like, there's so much power, because all of the things that they have done in the name of Venus is now being passed on to you, to be able to hold for your family and your children to come. So thank you. Sorry about the technical difficulties. I don't know what's going on. My computer just all the way froze. I was like, but we're here. So yes. I do want to jump into some of the questions that we talked about, because I really want to know a little bit more. If you can tell the people what Ccrb is, like, what is that?
Yeah. So, Ccrb stands for Civilian Complaint Review Board, and we are a city agency that independently investigates, mediates, and at times administratively prosecute allegations of police misconduct. So we serve as civilian oversight of the NYPD. We're like the largest police oversight body in the nation, because NYPD is the largest police force in the world. Our investigators are all civilian. Our attorneys are all civilian, and it's just people like me and you that go to school to be skilled investigators and to figure out if misconduct happened, and if it did, hold those police officers accountable through disciplinary actions.
That's very helpful. Like I said, that definitely helps to frame the conversation as we go. And you have a presentation, right, that you're going to share some information about and go a little bit deeper. So we can bring the presentation up, and I'll actually give you the floor so you can kind of go through your presentation. And then what I'll do is I'll come back on and ask you some more follow-up questions. But community, if you have any questions throughout this time, please feel free to put it in the chat, and we will put it on the screen and we'll try to answer it towards the end.
Awesome.
It's all yours.
Cool. So someone will be able to just kind of like press skip, right? Okay, awesome. So like I had said before, I'm from a city agency. I work for a city agency as an outreach coordinator. And what we do is that we investigate, mediate, and prosecute allegations of police misconduct. And like, what's really interesting about our agency is that we are completely civilian. So we have we may know, for those who live in New York City, right? Like precincts have internal affairs bureaus inside of them, right? And those are police officers who are investigating misconduct of maybe, their fellow partners, their fellow officers in that precinct, right? But what our agency is striving to do is to be impartial, because there could be a conflict of interest within like that officer investigating, their partner, right? It's like you don't want to kind of, tattletale, right? If you wanted to do it in plainless terms, but this is a larger issue. We want to make sure that there is a body that is impartial, that stresses neutrality, and that is going to make sure that civilians are heard. So that's what we do. Next slide. Awesome. So this is a pretty, my apologies, this is a very pretty outdated board pictures. The new chair of our board is Mohammed Khalid. But this is how our board is created, right? It's a board of 15 members. So New York City Council appoints members from each borough. We have the police commissioner that designates 3 members that have law enforcement experience. So they're no longer, maybe they were, retired police officers, correctional officers, retired folks in law enforcement, but they have no authority to make any, law enforcement moves. They're just civilians. The NYC Public Advocate's Office appoints 1 board member. And then with the mayor and city council, they jointly appoint the chair, which the chair is now Mohammed Khalid. That was our former chair, Ms. Arva Rice, who I'm sure you guys know how much of a heavy hitter she is. But we are glad to have our interim chair, Mohammed Khalid, lead our board and making sure that our agency is doing what it has to do to hold officers accountable. So out of 15 members, there's 3 people who have law enforcement experience, but it's still, majority is still folks who that do not have law enforcement experience, right? That are not police officers, or who are not retired police officers or correctional officers, that are just, volunteering their time to do this important work. So the roles of the NYPD, we have like maintain order, serve and protect, render aid, and enforce the law. But there are other roles that the NYPD does, and all of that is outlined in the Police Patrol Guide, which is on the next slide. So the Police Patrol Guide is a public document. You could find this online, right? Like my director likes to say, like back in the day, it was like very small, but now it's kind of larger, right? Because it's a living document. As society changes, views on policing changes, views on what's appropriate changes. So all of the duties, procedures, and best practices are all outlined in the Police Patrol Guide. What our agency does on our front is that we investigate police officers' conduct by reviewing the Police Patrol Guide. So we would account what is considered misconduct from the Police Patrol Guide, which outlines what's misconduct and what's not. So it's kind of like our agency's holy grail. So there are 4 allegations that we investigate, and we love to use the acronym FADO as a helpful reminder. So we investigate force, abuse of authority, discourtesy, and offensive language. So the first is force, right? This is excessive or unnecessary use of physical force. So this looks like, impact actions, like slapping, pushing, grabbing. This looks like impact weapons like nightsticks, pepper sprays, and tasers, and just even the use of a firearm, right? Well, we all know use of a firearm, it has to be an objective, credible basis, right? But if an officer is just pointing their firearm at an individual and does not discharge any bullets, right? Like that is still an extreme act of aggression to even get to that point. And they have to justifiably explain why, right? Like it cannot be subjective. It has to be really objective. And that is excessive force, right? I like to kind of like weighted it like in hypotheticals, if we wanted to like say excessive force and percentages, right? Anything over the force that you put onto the officer is considered excessive. So, you know, if a person is detained, right? If I'm detained and afterwards an officer is manhandling me, right? They're continuing to use their impact weapons, right? That may look like excessive force because I'm no longer a threat. So abuse of authority is the second part of FATO, and it's usually our largest volume of complaints, right? Because police officers have a wide range of discretion. So they can kind of choose, you know, some officers that engage in misconduct, you know, they may assess what is dangerous, what is necessary. And honestly, not even officers that engage in misconduct overall, right? Like being a police officer, it really needs folks to really use their judgment to see like, should I intervene? Should I do this? Should I do that? So a lot of times we see that misconduct is really concentrated in abuse of authority. So this looks like stop, question, and frisk without sufficient cause. So sufficient cause is like objective, credible reasoning, right? Like nothing that is saying, you know, because like, for instance, I'm a Black woman, right? That like, I'm a threat, right? Or I could be aggressive, right? It's something that's like, you know, this person, I can vividly see them doing suspicious activity, and that's why I'm going to stop and frisk them. Improper entry, right? So officers are not allowed to come into anyone's home without you know, their consent, the civilian's consent, right? And they are allowed to come into the home only through a search warrant, right? So we like a search warrant, a court order document that is sealed by a judge that says that the officers have the right to enter the home. But if the officers do not have search warrants, right, like civilians have the right to keep their doors closed and not allow the officer to come in. It's your home, it's your property. And a lot of times, right, like when we're dealing with officers and they're such a huge authority figure that sometimes we kind of forget that we do have autonomous rights within interactions. And that's a big one that folks kind of forget. Refusal to provide name and show number, that's a really common one. Sometimes we see this often in protests, right? Like an officer is just covering their badge number, covering their name, right? That's called concealing identity, and that definitely calls for, and if that happens, right, that may be a basis of a complaint. Threatening to call ICE, right? With this whirlwind of things that are happening right now with the new administration, the threat of ICE has been rampant in communities that I come from, and communities that a lot of us live in. But officers and ICE really are not supposed to be working together because they're two separate entities. ICE is a federal level, it's a federal entity, and NYPD is a city entity. So there's really no cross for work. So if an officer is like using ICE, right, throwing it around to try to get a civilian who they perceive to be, you know, undocumented or a migrant, that is a problem. And that is something that a civilian can come to us and file a complaint about. Forceful removal to a hospital, right? Like officers just cannot forcibly remove folks, you know, to a hospital. Like there's just certain rights that have to be placed. We also investigate sexual misconduct and bias-based policing. And they're on the next slides, hopefully. Okay, perfect. So sexual misconduct, a lot of times this kind of gets left behind, but it happens often in communities of color, of Black and Brown communities. Like sexual violence does happen between authority figures. So that is something that we do investigate and that we fought really hard to have that jurisdiction. So out of just trigger purposes and warnings, I'm not going to read everything. So I would love for you guys to take a moment to just read it yourself, but anything along the lines of like harassment, humiliation, motivated police actions that are sexually, that is definitely something that we investigate. And I want to highlight like romantic propositions. You know, like officers really should not be trying to hit on anyone on the job, right? Like, obviously we're all people, and what we do when we take off our uniforms, when we take off our IDs, is our business. But it's really important that officers maintain that professionalism as a public servant, right? I'm a public servant as well. Like, I work for the city, so it's inappropriate for me to hit on someone that I'm working with, right? So the same thing goes for an officer too. So if that was to happen and a civilian feels uncomfortable and they feel like they have to say yes or have to engage in order for the officer to leave them alone or to not bother them, then that definitely is something that we could investigate. So we also investigate bias-based policing and racial profiling. This is a separate department within our agency, and this department has been in effect since like 2022. So it's still pretty new, because there's one thing to say that misconduct has happened to an individual, but there's another thing to say that it happened because of the person's color, the person's religion. It takes a lot more time for the investigators to find trends that the officer has been making racially motivated stops for a long time. So we need more data. We need to go into the courts and do all that stuff. So we just have a department that strictly investigates bias-based policing and racial profiling. So that's, an encounter that is based on discrimination against anyone's race, religion, ethnicity, gender, housing status, disability, and also age. I also want to highlight like sexual orientation, right? Right now, we live in a world where, we have LGBTQ plus individuals that need to feel seen, right? Because sexuality is a spectrum, and now there's pronouns. And if officers are engaging and using pronouns that a civilian does not want to use, like, for example, if my pronouns are like they, their, and an officer is continued, and they see that my gender is assigned a female, maybe my pronouns are him, his, or they, their, and I give the officer my ID, and they are continuously, calling me miss, ma'am, and I say, hey, just want to correct you that my pronouns are they, their. I really don't want to be called she, her, and they continuously call me pronouns that I don't identify with. That could be a basis of a complaint too, right? Because you're just not respecting who I am, right? You're not respecting what I'm doing. Same thing for like age, right? A lot of that discrimination on age happens often to young people, young Black and brown people, right? Like, come here, little boy, come here, little girl, like things that the terms and words that could demean a person by their age is definitely a category that we investigate too. So Athenia said, how many instances of bias are needed to be seen in order for it to be fireable? So that's a very good question, and it just really depends on a lot of factors. Like, usually fireable offenses are like extreme acts of excessive force or extreme acts of sexual misconduct. So as far as like biases, I would, there are not many times where I get to know how many officers are being fired for biases. But I know as for certain, if there is extreme acts of excessive force on the table, extreme acts of sexual misconduct, then there are talks about termination. So discourtesy, right? That's speaking, gesturing, or behaving rudely. So that's foul language, use of profanity, discourteous conduct, gestures, or actions. So profanity, that's covered, right? Like, officers can use profanity. It really depends on the situation. But officers should not just be coming into the situation already using profanity, right? We do understand that, sometimes officers may ask individuals to comply several times and they're just not complying, and there may need to be an escalation of tone. And our executive director says best, right? Like, just because it's in a police patrol guide does not mean that it's perfect policing, right? There are plenty of things that personally, probably should be fixed. But those are just like what's outlined in the police patrol guide, right? But profanity can be investigated. Discourteous conduct, gestures, or actions can be investigated as well. And lastly, offensive language is the last part of FATO. This is taking it up a notch, right? So it's racially and religious slurs and anything that is verbally offensive to your race, ethnicity, nationality, gender, religion, disability, and the list goes on, right? So disability is a big one too, for folks that have disabilities, maybe like mental disabilities, right? Like physical disabilities. If an officer is using that as a means to discriminate, then that's definitely something that we can investigate. So the Right to Know Act law, right? So this is like one of my favorite parts of the presentation is talking about the Right to Know Act law. This law, what has been in effect since 2018, and it's basically like checks and balances when it comes to like stops, questions, and frisk. So the first part of the Right to Know Act law is for the officer to identify themselves by providing their name, other information such as rank, command, and shield number. And that's just really important because that goes back into abuse of authority, right? If an officer is refusing to tell a civilian who they are, that is a problem, right? Because we need to know, it's very important for us to know like who is in our communities, right? Who is patrolling our communities, who is protecting and serving us, right? So if an officer is concealing their identity, it makes us feel uneasy. With some exceptions, right? Explain the reason why they're stopping you, right? A common exception is if like you are about to commit a crime, you are in an act of committing a crime, right? Like then the officer does not need to stop and ask you why they're stopping you. They'll just pursue to arrest you, right? But for other certain instances, right? Like I use this example of like, if there is an elder in our family, if there's an elder in our community that is important to us, and maybe they went missing, right? Like there's a lot of elders that are going missing, suffering from dementia, and an officer may ask people in the community, right? It doesn't mean that they're accusing you of like kidnapping the elder, but they are just doing their job to just ask, hey, have you seen, Mr. So-and-so, right? Have you seen Mrs. So-and-so? So that's a way of just like protecting and serving as well. With certain, inform you of the right to say no when asking for your consent to search a person, property, vehicle, or home. That is the most important part of the Right to Know Act law. One, you have the right to decline a consensual search. You do not have to allow an officer to search you. How you know it's consensual or not, usually it's just by the terms that they ask you, like, can I search, your bag? What's in your pocket? What's in your hoodie, or what's in your sleeves, right? Like things like that indicates that, they're asking me a question. And sometimes like officers who, are engaging in misconduct, or sometimes they talk in very like convoluted wording that's like very hard to decipher, right? But usually if they're asking a question, if they're phrasing it as a question, it's consensual. You can also ask the officer like, hey, is this a consensual search? Because if it is, I decline. And more importantly, the officer must inform you of your right to say no, right? So it's kind of giving you your rights and keeping an open level of transparency. The Right to Know Act law, that law applies to level 1 stops, level 2 stops, and level 3 stops. So anyone who probably knows like a lot of the legislation that's going on, right? There was a legislation that was passed called the How Many Stops Act. And I thought personally that I was a piece of legislation that was really important, right? Because it started to kind of ring a bell to people like, well, stops, right? Like, how do we know like the different stops, and what can we do when we are being stopped with by level 1, 2, and 3s. So just wanted to kind of go into like detail, like really briefly, like what different levels of stops it is. And I'll definitely send that literature to Athenia to share with you guys. Level 1 is general right of inquiry, right? So that's if an officer is coming up to you, just asking you general questions, right? So that says, like, where are you going? Where do you live, right? Officers are allowed to ask those questions, but you have two things that you can do. You can either, answer the questions if you feel like you want to. You could not answer the questions because you are not detained, right? Level 1 stops you're not detained. So an officer is not supposed to restrict your freedom of movement. And if they restrict your freedom of movement, right, that may be a basis of filing a complaint, right? Because that would be, engaging in misconduct, right? Stopping you from your free will to leave, right? Or you can just ask, like, officer, like, what level stop is this? Am I, am I free to leave because I don't feel comfortable answering these questions, right? Level 2 is non-accusatory questioning. So it kind of relates back to like the question with the scenario with the elder, right, that went missing, right? That would be considered like non-accusatory questioning. It's like asking about things that are going on in the community. With level 2, right, they may ask you like, where did you just come from? Do you know anything about this incident that happened, right? With level 2s, you're not detained, so you are free to leave, and you can either walk away, you can ask the officer, am I free to leave? You could even ask the officer, hey, what level of street encounter is this? What levels 1 and 2, like, the officers are not searching you. They should not search you because it's not an escalated level. These are just, very 2 low levels of stops, right? Levels 1 and 2. But level 3, that's an escalated level, right? That's reasonable suspicion. So that means that an officer has, objective, credible basis that you have committed a crime, you're about to commit a crime, or you're an accomplice, right? So the officer may ask you for your right to, thank you, Sylvia, for your right to search you. And for that, you can say, yes or no to that as well. But it's just very important to kind of like know the levels of street encounters. And you can also just ask the officer to just keep that level of like transparency. So we can, move forward. And that's just how the business card looks like too. So I'll cover like 2 more slides, like 2 more very important slides. Who can file, right? Anyone can file a complaint. You don't have to live in New York City. If you happen to visit and, you're from Georgia, right? You visited New York to see your cousin, something went down with the police, right? You can file that complaint. As long as you are a witness or you experienced police misconduct, you can file a complaint regardless of your residency. We accept complaints regardless of immigration status, and we do not ask for the immigration statuses of the complainants nor the witnesses, because we find, and I know a lot of my colleagues in city agencies find that people who are coming from immigrant backgrounds, they are very fearful of going to city agencies for help, right? Because they don't want, for their immigration status to be used against them. So we really just don't act. We just want to make sure that it's documented and that we are holding officers that do wrong accountable. And we have translation services available in all languages for people that are limited in English proficiency. This last slide that I wanted to go over is just how to file. So there's 4 ways that you can file. You can file by calling our hotline at 1-800-341-2272, or you can call 311. You can also visit our office at 100 Church Street, 10th floor, Lower Manhattan. There's many trains right here, like the A-C line, the 4-5 line, the 1-2-3 line, like, Fulton Street is our hub, or also Chambers Street. The most easiest way to file is really filing online. We have a website, nyc.gov/ccrb complaint. It takes no more than 5 minutes. And don't worry if you don't have all of, if you don't know everything. We have all the technologies, access to body worn cameras, subpoena powers, to street cameras, access to roll call. We'll fill out the gaps, just get the complaint in. We live in a world where, our phones are computers. So if you have, Facebook, if you have Instagram, if you have Twitter, you can always DM us. And lastly, you can also file at your local precinct, right? And folks who just want to be old school and just get the complaint form and postage-free envelope, but you do not have to file at the local precinct. You can file with the first three. So for the sake of time, we could, end the presentation right here. But that's pretty much, what is the most important part of the Right to Know Act of the CCRB.
Okay. Well, we actually had, I don't know if we could put that slide back up, because we had a question about what happens after someone makes a complaint, like what happens in that.
Okay, yeah, that actually is the slide that talks about that. So once a civilian files a complaint, within 2 to 3 business days, you will be reached back out by intake. This is, we want to make sure that you just do not hear back from somebody after you file. So the intake department will kind of talk about just get another recollection of what went down between you and the officer, and then we'll figure out if it fits within our jurisdiction fatal. If it does fit within our jurisdiction fatal, we push it over to investigations. If it doesn't, there's other entities in law enforcement that may look like NYPD, like MTA officers, FBI officers, maybe the sheriff's department, state police, right? We'll push it over to them. For investigations, you have 2 options, unless it is extreme, unless it's excessive force or sexual misconduct. We do not mediate those cases. But if it isn't those cases, we usually, allow people to say, do you want to mediate? Do you want to investigate? Sometimes mediations go successful, but if it doesn't go successful, and if you still feel like nothing is being rectified, we don't throw out the case, we'll investigate it. With investigations, right, it could take 6 months up to, a year, right? Just like any legal proceeding. No legal proceeding is being done within 3 months. None. So it takes time. But within that time, we're going to interview the witnesses, the complainants. We're going to interview the officer. They are required to give a sworn statement, right? So if they falsify that statement, that that comes with consequences. We also have subpoena powers, body-worn camera footage, so we get all that information. Once the investigation is over, we will kick it over to a 3 board member panel. So from the 15 board members, 3 people will be assigned to a case, and they will review the investigators' findings, recommendations, and then they will give their final recommendation of disciplinary action to the police commissioner to implement to the officers, right? So we kind of discipline on an administrative skill. So, our disciplinary actions, if we do prosecute, it doesn't mean that, the officer, if it comes down to it, the officer, it doesn't mean that they're going to go to jail, because we don't have jurisdiction over that. We have jurisdiction over how their job is impacted by the misconduct. So from a range of things, right, from training, right, to more cases like loss of vacation days, to extreme cases like demotion and termination. Those are the spectrums into which we cover. And then, so that's what we do.
Gotcha. So Venus, and this is also one of my questions. So we had someone say, if you file a complaint years ago and you never hear back from them for years, can you still follow up on the complaint? So this seems like an open loop. Is there a closed loop where you then follow up with the person who made the complaint and let them know, and I know that's a little sticky, right? Because then it goes into HR, okay, what the reprimand was, or if the person was reprimanded or not, or can you talk a little bit about that part?
So we have an 18-month statute of limitations. So when it comes to a complaint being filed, there really is 18 months for that person to make a complaint. If a person has not heard back from the CCRB in years, right? You can always reach out to me or someone from the agency, and we could look into that case to see what happened. Usually it's really a miscommunication. A lot of times when people from the community reach out about like their case, it's either that like maybe the email of maybe our agency's email went to spam or into junk mail. So a lot of times it could just be a miscommunication thing, but we always make sure that if a civilian is reaching out about their case, that they can get those complaints statuses. And we also have a complaint status page. I could put that in the chat. But that complaint status page, if you have the complaint number, you can just look it up online.
Got it. And so will it say information about like what happened, or will it just say like in review or closed, or like what? Will it say like officer so and so was demoted? Like, I mean, what?
Yeah. So that's a separate thing. So basically, we only, when it comes to the case, I'm not too sure if the civilian knows the outcome of that case. Maybe the complaint status will show that. But if a police commissioner does not agree with our findings, we do post deviation letters. So those deviation letters kind of explain like, we worked really hard, we did the work, but the police commissioner, did not implement this particular disciplinary action because of ABC. So there is transparency between our agency. We also produce reports that talks about like the stats and also some of the barriers that we face when investigating cases. But as far as like for complaint statuses, like the civilian will definitely know whether or not it was substantiated. So they will know whether or not the officer was found guilty.
Got it. So this is very helpful. A lot of people are saying that this was really great. This information is very needed in the community. Also it's helpful to see the different steps and how decisions are made along the way. Transparency like this is so important for accountability. And so I know you're in New York City and I'm in Georgia now. And we have a lot of people joining us from all different states. Is this something that's only specific to New York City, or are other states also adhering to some version of this?
So there are other states that have their own civilian oversight body, but like there's not a lot of states that are doing this to that robust level because just speaking for personal experience, like the police force is so vast. So, law enforcement transparency, we're still trying to build that today. And our agency, we are still not like perfect, right? Like we have our obstacles because we're investigating police officers and we're all civilians. So there is a lot of what goes into it. Like we're trying to, fight for more powers, right? There's a lot of legislation that would impact our job tremendously that our policy department and our intergovernmental affairs department is always advocating to our city and stakeholders. But I think it's just something that, progression with this type of work, it's slow. But there are other counties that are doing something like this. So, we always love to like network with other oversight bodies and to see like, hey, like what are you guys are doing? How can we, improve, right? And then how can we like create, this robust system of accountability?
Got it. Thank you for sharing that. So one of the things that don't recall you talking about is the part of what to do when you need to say no and you're still met with resistance, like, because that's what a lot of times we do see in the news and people are, are recording and stuff like that is they said no, or they were like, oh, can you step out? So if you get stopped, you talked about more walking stuff, right? So if you're driving and you get stopped and a police officer comes up to your car and you're like, I'm sorry, can you share why you're stopping me? And they're like, no, can you step out your car? That's technically a question. So is that a level 1, 2, or 3? Like, how do you identify what that might be?
So when an officer is like asking, can you step out your car? Traffic stops, they also have their own like very gray area guidelines. You know, if an officer is like saying, "Can you step out your car?" Right? I'm thinking it's a question. So, you know, you have the right to say like, "I rather not set up my car," right? But as a person, you know, like as humans, we intuitively know when, you know, we just have to comply. Because I always tell a lot of the young people that I deal with in like Central Brooklyn, sometimes you're gonna have to comply because it's really a life matter, right? Like as long as that officer has their body worn cameras, right, you can tell them to turn it on. The body worn camera will capture it all. You have a passenger in the car, have them record at a reasonable distance because you have the right to record, right? And comply with that stop and then file a complaint after. Because if there is a back and forth between you and the officer, right, like it only just agitates the situation.
Yeah.
You know,
you can be seen as combative.
Yeah, you're seen as combative, aggressive, right? So I'm a firm believer of like, you know, you could assert your rights, right? But also be smart, and like if an officer is just not budging, they're, you know, on a power trip, right? Comply and file that complaint later. A lot of like Black and brown people personally, like we don't file complaints, we don't document anything. Like, you know, even if a case is not substantiated, it stays on their record forever. I was just talking to a detective yesterday, and he was telling me like, you know, it stays on our record forever, and this and that. And I was like, yeah, like because it's important, right? So like that's another way of accountability, right? Seeing like who in our community has CCRB complaints, right? And what is it being done about it?
Yeah, I know like in a lot of cases where there was excessive force that was happening in, they'll usually say, oh, this police officer had a situation in the past where they were aggressive, they were seen as too aggressive, or you know, or they had five accounts of aggression in some of their arrest in the past. So that also helps to build their case when it does become something that's, because it's like they have a history of this. They've shown that this is part of their being, of who they are, and it makes it a lot easier to be able to pull their card and to get them removed from the force at that point.
Or more so if you want to get a city settlement, right? Like oftentimes being in a community, right, where I have like assisted with like going over the complaint process with people, right? Afterwards, they tell me like months on the line, hey, like I just want a city settlement because the investigation that the Ccrb did, all that evidence, all that findings was beneficial to my civil suit. So this is all public information that we're being partners for other law enforcement accountability agencies to step in and continue the work that we do.
I like that. So we got Innovative Resilience, East Brooklyn Village. She says this is great information. Green Butterfly, she was the one that was saying something about after a year. So she says no, she doesn't have the complaint number. So what happens if someone doesn't have the complaint number? Are they able to, like, is there other identifiable information that you might be able to look up a complaint?
Yeah, like if their name and their email that they use to file that complaint. We can also go back and see what happened.
Awesome. We also you have to watch his or her, right? Body language from the beginning, from the time they walk up to your window. Yeah. Very true. Because a lot of them, they come ready with their hand already on they gun. And I'm like, dang, like, I ain't got nothing.
Good. Yeah.
What you need from me? I ain't got nothing. This was so good. I did have a couple of questions. You talked about so cameras, just for purposes of everyone, because I've never really been in this experience, knock on wood, and neither has any of my family members. But is there a way to be able to identify if a camera is on, like their body cams are on?
Yeah, so there are ways to identify, right? When officer's body worn camera is on, when there's turning on, it will blink a red light. And that will indicate that the officer turned on their body worn cameras. And I believe once it's a steady green, that means that it's fully on. So when it's turning on, audio is automatically recording, but it takes about 30 seconds for the visual to record, but the audio is already there. After 30 seconds, it will be, I think, a steady green light, and that's when it will entirely show the encounter.
What's happening now? I know I've seen where police officers do they still have like a cover almost, like they can like, because I've seen like video recordings where it's like half seen, like it's almost like a shutter or something is over it.
Yeah.
Is that something that their cameras have now, or have they done away with that?
So I'm not too privy on like the ins and outs of the camera, but there are instances where they are tampering with the body-worn cameras, even if they position it a certain way. And we do investigate that. And that's something that our chief prosecutor usually investigates, because that is, that's tampering with evidence. So that also brings a host of consequences too that can be added to the already case, right? So if an officer is already being investigated for excessive force, right? If we see that there's body-worn cameras that are being tampered with, that is something that our agency can definitely add to the investigation to make sure that there's accountability on not only of the actions of the officer, but also, the concealment of it too.
Got it. That's definitely helpful. And I have one last question I had wrote down, because I'm like, I know I'll be going in the trains and they do these intermittent stop and frisk, and they're like, oh, can I look in your bag? So if I say no, like what's to happen there? Can they deny me entry into the train, or like what does that look like when you say no to a question?
Yeah. So when it comes to like train stations, I believe one of our partner colleagues, the Office of the Community Liaison, I think they said that for train stops, right? Like they just will tell you that you just can't go on a train, but they won't like arrest you or, make it a big deal. You just can't take the train that stop in that station. And I think when it comes to like train stations and like and searching, we aren't really investigating those, because those are a separate body. Like it's they're doing like terrorist searches, so it's a bit different. So that civilian would just get off and just go on another stop. But for a regular like stop, right, like if you say no and the officer continues to persist, right, I would not say to fight the officer, no, give my bag, because a lot, I would just allow them to search and file that complaint later, because a lot of times, right, an officer who are trying to do wrong, like they will label you as the aggressor. So I think we like to highlight like safety tactics at our agency, like, safety things that can keep you safe, right? Like not to agitate the situation, right? Like if you know that you're inserting your rights, but the officer is still persistent, right? Comply, and then come with that complaint, and we'll investigate that.
Got it. So we have a question from the group. Where do you find this information that you shared today? I'm in Albany. However, my company is headquartered in New York City. This was a great session.
Yes, awesome. You could find this information on our website at nyc.gov/ccrb. I'm not sure if I can write in the chat, because I just don't. Yeah. But I could definitely send that to you, Athenia. But we also talk to the Albany Civilian Oversight Body of their officers, of their police, all the time. So that is definitely, Albany is one of our, it's like our sister. We go there often to do like policy work. So we can find a lot about what we do. And then you can also find those policies, the policy reports that we write, on our website too.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Venus, for sharing that. All right. So this was really amazing. This was some great stuff. It was, and some deep content, like for us to really, but very necessary. As I said earlier at the top, that we need to show up for ourselves. And this is part of showing up for ourselves, right? We get in this space of, we got to hide information, or what they say, snitches get stitches. And it's like, that whole mentality was a mentality of, that made us go deeper in the hole as a community. And this is really a part of, I'm hoping for us to understand why we need to say something when we see something happening. So I do want to ask my two questions. What is the takeaway that you would like for people to walk away from this session today? And then I'll ask you the last question before we head out.
Yeah, I think the takeaway today is to know that you have rights and that you could come to a civilian body and investigate. A lot of times, like a lot of Black people, we're very fearful of coming out and say something and speaking up. So just knowing that you have rights and that you can enforce them, that you can insert them, and just also just being equipped with your rights, because a lot of times we get taken advantage of when we don't know our rights. So like knowledge is power, and just knowing your rights and how to move in New York City. I think that's like the biggest takeaway. So empowering yourself with this information.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So stay empowered, y'all. And the last question is, what does Juneteenth mean to you?
Oh, I love this question. Juneteenth means to me, it means resilience. Honestly, it means resilience and it means survival. I'm so glad that Juneteenth is finally getting the light that it deserves, because that's my July 4th, to be honest. Juneteenth means to me like all of the things that my Black American ancestors fought for, a lot of things that we have today. I think there is a misconception that Black Americans do not have culture. We do. Our culture is embedded in American culture. There are people who come to America and engage in American culture, which is Black culture. So Juneteenth is really about Black culture, and it's about celebrating us, celebrating the different diasporas of Black people, even the dialects. Like I come from the Gullah Geechee Islands. My family is rooted in Juneteenth. So I think it's about celebrating Black American history and Black culture, and just, I think that's the biggest thing, and just spreading awareness, because it's really, sometimes we're really misguided on like Black American culture, but it's so important, and the world really feeds on our culture, and we do not get the recognition that we deserve. So that's what Juneteenth is.
Yeah, thank you so much, Venus. I really appreciate that, and I love that your family's from the Gullah Geechee. I want to go visit there so badly. It was a pleasure having you join us on today. We're gonna say goodbye, but please stay so that we can debrief after the session behind stage. So thank you so much. This was very amazing.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome. Awesome. All right, y'all. So thank you. This was I know it was heavy. I know it's my birthday and all of that, but this was such a good session. Like I really appreciated all of the information. I appreciate all of you jumping in and sharing your content and your questions and your thoughts and your feelings about this. We are always looking for new topics to be able to share with you that are relevant to us, things that are going to help us to do what I'm about to talk about, which is have your torch, right? So if any of you have been following us on our Instagram page, on our social media, and emails, we've been sending out messages to you, letting you know that we are going live with our membership platform. And this is going to be something that it is very new, right? We're looking for torchbearers. This is an opportunity for individuals to really come into leadership, but supportive leadership, right? There are different levels to this. We're going to be doing workshops, trainings about a number of different things. Over the years, we've talked about ways to protect ourselves. And right now we're going into spaces where we need to understand what that looks like for us, right? And that could look in different ways for different people. I know for myself, I have 3 young children. I am not trying to have a gun in my house. However, I do need to know how to use a gun, right? So still learning and going out and doing classes and workshops and learning how the kickback and feeling what that is, being prepared for those moments. I have plenty of friends who have guns. I have friends who have basements full of guns. I can always go to their house and go get a gun, but I need to know how to use it when I get it. So being able to understand those kind of things. So we're going to be doing some workshops on that with some training. So that's going to be a part of some of the different levels. We're going to be doing not just guns protection, but also self-defense. So we partner with a number of different organizations where we're going to be offering that, having conversations about what that looks like. This is a part of it right here, what we just talked about today, when we are understanding how to speak, how to advocate for ourselves. And sometimes that means being quiet, y'all. Like, we got to be quiet. Shut your mouth, just so that you can live another day, so that you can be able to fight, so that you can be able to tell your side of the story. And that is the part that I'm constantly telling my kids, especially my boys, that this is not a space for you to say anything. When we get home, you have a conversation where you tell me, and then we'll do the things that we need to do to advocate for you. But sometimes in the moment is not the right time. So really just having conversations about that, then talking about finance and where we're going in that finance world. I don't know if y'all know, the American dollar is depreciating, y'all, and we need to find ways to be able to operate in a different space. So I said that all to say there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be happening in this space. We have some really cool merch and things like that are going to be a part of it. We hope that you join us. It'll only be available for the VIP space for 48 hours. The rest of the spaces will continue to be open, but the VIP area will only be it will be limited. We are going to be doing some strategic sessions, some holiday gatherings, and they're not just going to be regular like party kind of situations. Like, this is really about leveling up, about being torchbearers, leading the way, being a guide. And this is off the backs of Harriet Tubman, right? She has been my spirit guide for, I don't know, the last 2 or 3 years. She has been coming into my spirit and sharing with me, like, I need to resurface. And that's why we had Harriet Tubman impersonator come on a couple of weeks ago and help us reconnect with her and the things that she has shared, how we need to come up with songs and thoughts and be intentional about what we're doing. So if you are interested, please go to our website, Juneteenth NY, and definitely connect with us. This is going to be something that's going to be really amazing. And it's a star of Paramount. Give me a couple of minutes. I have a couple of slides that I need to go through. We have our intro to modeling session workshop, which actually one of the perks for joining the membership is to get discounts at some of these sessions. So the intro to modeling with Edwin Paramount. So if you are interested in modeling and being a model, this is going to be a really great piece. This is going to be in person. We'll have a couple that will also be virtual. So this is a great opportunity if you're looking to get into this area of life. We also have amazing opportunities to be a sponsor, and I really consider it more of a partnership with us, not sponsorship. I really want to understand how we can make organic relationships between what we already have going on and what you are trying to achieve with your business. So if you're a company that you may work for is interested in doing something like this, please connect with us. And like I said, we are growing, y'all. So we are not just going to be in the New York City area alone. We are also in Toledo, Ohio. We're looking at some conversations in Detroit, in Orlando, and also in Atlanta, Georgia. So we are definitely looking at some bigger things in the future. Be a part of the Heart of Juneteenth, which are volunteers. I did a workshop on Tuesday talking about what it means to be a volunteer and how we take care of our own. We have a good group of volunteers that come in and they stay with us and they bring more people, but we always wanted to open it up for people because a lot of our volunteers end up joining our board and becoming amazing individuals and growing in different spaces and learning so much. So we definitely hope that you'll join us for that. What else we got? Marketing tidbit with me. I have been doing marketing sessions lately because I've noticed that in our communities, a lot of people have been losing their jobs and they are trying to figure out how to get their business out there. And this is a great opportunity, a great way for you to be able to get your business out there. I'm not just going to talk about, oh, do this, do that. We're actually going to talk about what your mission, your vision is, what your SWOT, which is your strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats. We're going to help you to build out your avatars for your business. Because a lot of people, when you ask them, who's your target market? They're like, everybody. I sell water. Everybody needs water. Yeah, but everybody's not willing to pay for water is what I will always say. Who's going to be willing to pay you for your service? That's the difference. Being able to identify identify what that is. And then we will also help you to build it out inside of our framework. So on Thursdays, we have workshops that we are doing. Next week, Thursday at 7, we will be doing workshops where we show you how to use our platform that we created to do automations with your social media, your emails, your text messages, creating newsletters that goes out on its own, auto responses on your social media. Like those are all things that help you, most people who are a army of one, to get through their day and give some time back to themselves. We are still looking for virtual summit artists and performers overall. This 31st, which is Monday, is going to be the last day that we are accepting anybody who is for wanting to be a performer with us. So we ask you to go to our website, JuneteenthNY.com, to register for that. A couple more. Just again, like I said, the corporate performance that is ending soon. Let me see what else we got up here to go up. Approved vendors. So our vendors, we have a Facebook group that we are inviting just general vendors to be able to join our Facebook group and to be able to talk and have conversation with us about what it means to be a vendor. We do the information sessions. We have one that is going to happen on Saturday. Saturday at 11 a.m. And then we also have ones that will be happening on Mondays at 7. So Saturday at 11 and Mondays at 7. So if you are interested in learning a little bit more about our vendors and being a vendor and what it means, we definitely encourage you to join us. All right, y'all. That was a lot. I said a whole host of a lot of things, but I thank you all again for just joining us, and for I look forward to seeing some of you be some torchbearers as a part of our new program that we are launching, and get some merch. We're going to be selling some really cool merch with t-shirts and cups and a whole host of everything. So I thank you again for joining me on my birthday. This was a great conversation. I look forward to seeing you next week, Thursday at 12. Have a blessed one, everyone. Bye.